Have you ever looked at something broken, empty, or forgotten, and wondered if it could bloom again? Welcome to Nest Nature, where we take what others throw away and turn it into gardens full of color, charm, and life. In this video, we'll explore DIY trash garden ideas, simple, thrifty, and beautiful ways to transform bottles, cans, teacups, and even old piggy banks into vibrant borders, patios, and backyard treasures. You'll find timestamps in the description so you can jump to the ideas you love most. And if you have questions, share them in the comments. I'll be there to read and respond. And before we begin, I want to share something with you. Maybe to you, I'm just another face on a screen. But behind this channel, there's a real story and a real family. This isn't just a video, it's a piece of my heart. Every like, every comment, every subscribe truly matters. When you subscribe, you're not just helping a channel grow. You're helping a dream stay alive. You're giving a small family hope, one click at a time. Thank you for being here. Thank you for seeing me. In a quiet corner of the backyard, the rustic wooden fence no longer stood as just a divider. It had become a stage for color, whimsy, and the gentle art of transformation. Here, rows of once forgotten piggy banks, small treasures of childhood, chipped and abandoned, were reborn into living vessels of beauty. Their ceramic bodies, now brushed with strokes of cheerful paint, reflected sunlight in pastel pinks, soft blues, and bright yellows. From each piggy's round opening, life poured forth in the form of flowers. Marigolds in bold orange flames, asters in delicate lavender hues, and chrysanthemums bursting with golden cheer danced together in the breeze. Nestled among them, the deep rosy tones of sedum autumn joy glowed, their petals carrying the warmth of the season into every corner of the garden. The rustic fence, once weathered and grey, now hummed with playful spirit. Its wood bore the weight of many seasons, yet it seemed renewed by the laughter of color spilling across it. With every glance, the fence whispered a reminder: beauty does not always require new beginnings, sometimes it emerges from what has been left behind. Children who passed the garden paused in delight. "Look, the piggies are smiling with flowers," one exclaimed, as bees dipped curiously into the blooms. The whimsical sight became a story for the neighborhood, an unexpected charm that turned ordinary walks into small adventures. In the shifting light of afternoon, shadows of piggy ears and flower stems stretched long across the grass. The planters stood not in grandeur but in humble joy, each one telling a story of resourcefulness, of seeing value where others saw waste. They were guardians of the rustic fence, keepers of blossoms that carried both memory and renewal. As autumn deepened, the piggy banks continued to bloom, their painted bodies standing bright against the fading green. They were more than planters, they were proof of imagination's power, proof that in every backyard or front yard, even in the smallest space, treasures could grow from the simplest hands. And so, the rustic fence no longer marked a boundary. It became an invitation, a colorful welcome into a garden where every passerby was reminded that joy, like flowers, blooms best when shared. In the heart of a tiny yard, a simple flower bed became something extraordinary. Not through grand design or costly stone, but through the delicate beauty of vintage teacups, each one placed like a jewel along the garden's edge. Their curved porcelain forms, some inherited, others rescued from forgotten cupboards, created a border that was at once whimsical and timeless. Painted in pastel shades of lavender, mint, and blush, the teacups glowed under the soft light of the afternoon sun. Some bore tiny floral patterns, faded with age yet still graceful, while others had been freshly brushed with vibrant colors to celebrate their second life. Within each cup, blossoms bloomed, marigolds in warm gold, asters in shades of violet, and chrysanthemums glowing like little suns. The edging curved gently along the soil, guiding the eye as though leading visitors on a quiet walk through a storybook. Children crouched low to examine the miniature blooms, marveling at how something as simple as a teacup could cradle such bursts of color. Bees hovered politely, dipping into the petals, as if acknowledging the teacup's new role as hosts of life. The yard itself was not vast, it was modest, framed by a rustic fence and a small wooden bench. Yet the presence of the teacup edging transformed the space, giving it character beyond its size. What might have been overlooked became an enchanting corner, drawing admiration from neighbors and passers-by alike. Each cup whispered its own tale, perhaps once holding morning tea, or being part of family gatherings. Now, it held the season's blossoms, carrying both memory and renewal. The garden seemed to hum with gratitude, as if proud to wear such an unexpected adornment. As autumn leaves drifted gently from nearby trees, the teacups stood steadfast, their blooms dancing in the crisp air. They were fragile yet enduring, delicate yet practical, a reminder that beauty can thrive in even the smallest of spaces. The tiny yard no longer felt small. It felt alive, overflowing with charm and imagination. And in the quiet of evening, When the last rays of sun brushed the porcelain rims, the garden glowed with a secret delight. That joy, when nurtured with care, could be found in the simplest of places, even at the edge of a flower bed lined with teacups. In the center of the garden, where paths of stone curved gently around flower beds, a spiral rose from the soil. Not carved from marble or cast in bronze, but built from the humblest of things, recycled glass bottles. Their shapes, once ordinary vessels of water, soda, or wine, had been transformed into an artwork that shimmered with life. Each bottle had been carefully chosen and painted, its color shining like a gem under the daylight. Emerald green sparkled like moss after rain, cobalt blues mirrored the sky above, and ambers glowed like autumn leaves caught in glass. Arranged in a graceful spiral, the bottles seemed to turn endlessly, leading the eye toward a center filled with blossoms of marigolds and chrysanthemums. Around this glowing sculpture, the cottage garden bloomed with abundance. Asters leaned in with their purple crowns, while sedum autumn joy glowed warmly against the spiral's glassy hues. Bees traced lazy circles through the air, landing gently on petals before darting toward the spiral as though it were a beacon. Visitors paused in wonder. Children stretched out their hands to touch the glass, marveling at the way sunlight scattered into fragments of color across the ground. "It's like a rainbow made from bottles," one whispered. And indeed, in the shifting light, the spiral seemed alive, bending sunlight into a painter's palette. The spiral was more than decoration, it was a story of renewal. Where others saw trash, here lay a vision of possibility, proof that beauty often hides in the discarded. It stood proudly in the modest garden, not as a grand monument, but as a gentle reminder that imagination can turn waste into wonder. As autumn deepened, leaves drifted onto the spiral, their reds and golds mingling with the glass tones. The bottles caught the glow of the setting sun, their colors burning brighter before dusk fell. In the quiet of evening, the spiral seemed almost to hum with the season, a harmony between man-made form and natural bloom. In this small garden corner, the recycled glass bottle spiral became a symbol of joy. It was a landmark for the neighborhood, a gathering point for eyes and hearts alike. And each day, as light poured through it, the spiral whispered the simplest of truths, that beauty, like the garden itself, is always waiting to be rediscovered. edge of the small patio, where brick met stone and shadows stretched long in the late afternoon, stood a gathering of iron frames. Once forgotten, rusting in corners and storage sheds, these frames had been reborn, not as tools of labor but as accents of beauty. Their iron bones, painted in cheerful hues of teal, soft yellow, and rustic red, now glowed like stained glass when kissed by sunlight. Each frame leaned gently against the patio wall, serving as a canvas for nature's artistry. Vines trailed upward, weaving their tendrils through the metal curves, while chrysanthemums bloomed boldly in golden clusters. Asters filled the gaps with purple stars, their petals soft yet bright against the iron's firm lines. Sedum autumn joy, with its dusty pink blooms, clung to the base, grounding the arrangement in a cushion of color. The patio itself was small, a modest space, no larger than a dining table. Yet with the presence of these iron frames, it felt transformed. What once seemed confined now breathed open, the vertical lines drawing the eye upward, creating a sense of height and possibility. Sitting on the wooden chair nearby, one could sip tea while gazing at a wall of living color. Neighbors who visited lingered longer than usual. "It's like a gallery," one said, admiring the way each frame seemed to hold a painting of flowers. Children peeked through the ironwork, playing hide-and-seek with the blooms. The patio, though tiny, had become a stage of joy, where art and garden spoke the same language. In the evening, as lanterns flickered to life, the painted iron shimmered in the soft glow. Shadows of vines curled across the patio stones, and the flowers seemed to lean closer, as if drawn to the warmth of the night. The air carried the scent of marigolds and damp earth, mingling with the laughter of those gathered. These frames were no longer remnants of the past, they were anchors of imagination, proving that even iron can carry softness when paired with petals. On this small patio, they stood as reminders that beauty need not come from vast spaces or grand gestures. It can be forged from what remains, painted fresh, and set to bloom again. Above the quiet garden path, the pergola stretched like an open frame toward the sky. Its wooden beams, worn yet steady, had found new adornment, garlands of colorful bottles that swayed gently with the wind. Once destined for the trash, these bottles had been given new voices, painted in bold hues of crimson, sapphire, and gold, each one shimmering like captured fragments of the sun. They dangled from twine and wire, their shapes simple but their presence magical. When the breeze passed, the bottles clinked softly together, creating a melody that was half song, half secret. Sunlight poured through the painted glass, scattering bursts of color across the patio stones below. It was as though the pergola had been draped in jewels, yet each gem was nothing more than a humble bottle renewed. Beneath this canopy of color, the garden seemed alive with delight. Marigolds flamed in orange and gold at the base, chrysanthemums opened wide in russet and cream, and asters nodded gently in shades of violet. A wooden bench sat in the dappled light, inviting anyone to pause and bask in the kaleidoscope overhead. Children called it the rainbow roof, laughing as they tried to catch the colored light in their hands. Visitors tilted their heads back, mesmerized by the shifting glow as the sun moved across the sky. Even in the stillness of evening, when lanterns flickered to life, the bottles held a quiet charm, glowing softly like lanterns themselves. The pergola was once a place of shade, a shelter from the midday heat. Now it was a place of wonder, where the ordinary became extraordinary through the touch of imagination. Every bottle carried a history, perhaps once holding water, juice, or wine. Now, each one held beauty, suspended in air, repurposed into art. As autumn deepened, vines began to wrap the beams, their tendrils weaving between the bottles. The mingling of greenery and glass made the pergola feel enchanted, like something lifted from a storybook garden. It was a reminder that joy does not require perfection. It only requires vision, the courage to see light where others see waste. And so the pergola, with its garlands of color, stood as a beacon of possibility, calling everyone who passed beneath it to look upward and believe in transformation. At the edge of the garden, where the earth met the path, a border rose, simple, rustic, and full of charm. Bamboo poles, cut to even lengths, stood in a quiet row. Their golden stalks carried the warmth of sun and soil, their texture rough yet graceful. But atop each pole, a surprise waited: vintage cups, painted in bright, cheerful colors, brimming with flowers. The fusion of bamboo and porcelain seemed unlikely, yet together they created harmony. Bamboo whispered of the forest, of rivers and wind, while the cups spoke of kitchens and hearths, of moments shared over tea. Now, united, they formed a line of guardians, holding blooms aloft as though offering them to the garden. Marigolds, with their golden flames, spilled from one cup, while asters unfurled in shades of violet from another. Chrysanthemums burst with layered petals, and sedum autumn joy blushed pink against the rustic bamboo. Japanese anemones swayed gently in the breeze, their white blooms catching sunlight like small lanterns. The border framed the flower bed like a living necklace. It guided visitors along the stone path, turning every step into a stroll through creativity. Children paused to count the cups, laughing as bees danced between them. Neighbors admired the unlikely pairing, their eyes lighting up at the whimsy of cups sitting proudly on bamboo poles. The tiny garden, once modest, now felt alive with character. The border gave it definition, but also personality, playful yet grounded, rustic yet refined. It was not made from expensive stone or polished iron, but from things already at hand, a handful of bamboo and cups that once knew another life. As autumn deepened, fallen leaves gathered at the base of the poles, their reds and golds mingling with the painted porcelain. The border remained steady, a reminder of resilience and reinvention. Even as the air grew cooler, the cups continued to bloom, their colors singing against the muted tones of the season. This rustic bamboo and cup fusion was more than decoration. It was a conversation between nature and memory, between the forest and the home. And for anyone who walked the garden path, it offered a gentle truth: beauty often lives in the places we least expect, waiting only for us to see it. In the quiet glow of the farmhouse garden, lanterns flickered to life. Their shapes were familiar yet unexpected, for they were born not from fine ironwork but from forgotten scraps of metal, junk given a second chance. Painted in soft creams, sage greens, and rustic greys, they carried a warmth that felt timeless, as though they had always belonged here. Each lantern stood as a small sculpture of renewal. Some hung from the pergola beams, their painted surfaces catching the last rays of sun. Others lined the stone pathway, guiding footsteps with gentle light. Inside, candles glowed steadily, their flames surrounded by clusters of marigolds and chrysanthemums, flowers chosen as companions for the season. The garden itself leaned in to embrace them. Asters swayed at their feet, purple petals shimmering in twilight, while sedum autumn joy blushed against the lantern bases. Japanese anemones stretched upward, their white blossoms glowing faintly in the lantern light. The combination of metal, flame, and bloom created a scene that was at once rustic and elegant. Visitors lingered longer in this corner of the yard. "They don't look like junk at all," one neighbor whispered, admiring the lanterns. And indeed, their former life was invisible now, hidden beneath coats of fresh paint and the poetry of purpose. What had once been discarded metal now shaped light, guiding hearts as much as eyes. In the evenings, the farmhouse-style lanterns became storytellers. Their shadows danced across the wooden beams, their glow settling softly over the patio table where cups of tea waited. The crackle of autumn leaves mixed with the quiet hum of bees retreating into the dusk. And in those moments, the lanterns seemed almost alive, breathing warmth into the cool air. They were not perfect, each carried quirks from its past life, curves slightly uneven, edges worn smooth with age. But these imperfections gave them character, a kind of honesty that matched the farmhouse spirit. They belonged to a world where beauty was not polished but lived in, crafted with care rather than purchased with haste. The lanterns whispered of resilience, of the joy that comes when waste becomes wonder. And in the farmhouse garden, their glow reminded all who passed by that even in the smallest scraps of life, light can always be found. At the heart of the garden stood a modest gazebo, its wooden beams rising like open arms to welcome the season. Yet what set it apart was not its shape or size, but the way it had been dressed, adorned with painted ceramic cups that hung like ornaments, each one transformed into a tiny cradle of blooms. The cups swayed gently in the breeze, painted in pastel pinks, sky blues, and sunny yellows. Once they had served tea at kitchen tables, holding laughter and warmth. Now, filled with flowers, they served the garden, carrying marigolds that glowed like embers, asters that sparkled in violet shades, and delicate Japanese anemones that nodded like stars on thin stems. From a distance, the gazebo seemed like a lantern itself, glowing with color as the cups caught the sunlight. Bees hovered around the blossoms, dipping into their depths, while butterflies fluttered in, drawn by the sudden abundance of nectar. The air was sweet with the scent of chrysanthemums and damp earth, weaving a tapestry of fragrance that welcomed every passerby. Inside the gazebo, a wooden bench offered a place to sit and rest. From there, one could gaze upward at the playful arrangement of cups, their patterns and blooms casting shifting shadows on the beams. It was a quiet sanctuary, small in size but rich in detail, a place where the ordinary had been reshaped into wonder. Neighbors passing by often slowed, drawn in by curiosity. Cups on a gazebo, they would murmur with delight, only to smile when they saw how whimsical and charming the idea truly was. Children pointed at the hanging cups, laughing as if they had stumbled upon a secret fairy house. As evening fell, the gazebo took on a softer glow. The painted cups, still holding their blossoms, reflected the fading light in muted tones. The blooms seemed to whisper, promising resilience against the cool air of autumn nights. The mini gazebo was more than a structure, it was a storyteller. Its cups spoke of memory, of kitchens and conversations, while its flowers sang of renewal and possibility. Together, they reminded all who visited that beauty often blooms in the simplest places, waiting for us to look closer. In a quiet corner of the garden, where bamboo whispered in the wind and gravel shimmered like silver beneath the sun, a new harmony was born. At first glance, it looked like a traditional Japanese garden, stones carefully arranged, moss soft as velvet, a trickle of water echoing serenity. Yet within this calm order, whimsy had found its place, piggy pots, reborn as vessels of bloom. The piggy banks, once chipped and forgotten, had been painted anew in muted tones, earthy browns, pale jade, and gentle ivory. Their round forms nestled easily among the stones, their cheerful faces turned toward the sun. From their openings spilled flowers, chrysanthemums glowing like golden lanterns, asters stretching purple stars, sedum autumn joy with blush-pink crowns, and Japanese anemones swaying like dancers in the breeze. The blend was unexpected, yet enchanting. The piggies softened the quiet formality of the Japanese design, adding playfulness without breaking its calm. Children who wandered in laughed, surprised to see piglets blooming with flowers, while adults smiled, charmed by the marriage of tradition and imagination. Around them, the garden breathed with balance. Raked gravel formed spirals that echoed the roundness of the pots. Smooth stones gleamed like river pearls, and moss spread gently at their feet. Bamboo fencing framed the corner, casting long striped shadows as the sun lowered in the sky. The piggy pots, in their cheerful stillness, became both guardians and companions of the space. In the evenings, when lanterns were lit and their glow fell upon the garden, the piggy pots seemed alive with quiet joy. Their painted surfaces caught the light, reflecting soft colors that blended with the hues of autumn blossoms. The trickle of water nearby seemed to hum in approval, adding rhythm to the stillness. The corner became a refuge, not only for the gardener but for anyone who entered. It whispered of resourcefulness, of joy found in what others discard. It showed that even in the elegance of tradition, there is room for play, for laughter, for small miracles. The piggy pots did not diminish the garden's serenity, they enriched it, like laughter woven into a calm conversation. And in this Japanese corner, their blooms spoke softly. That harmony is not about sameness, but about the beauty that grows when differences find a way to belong. Along the garden's edge, the fence became more than wood and wire, it became a canvas for light. Rows of blue glass bottles, gathered from forgotten corners, stood in a line along its length. Their hues ranged from deep cobalt to pale turquoise, each one polished and placed with care. When sunlight struck them, they glowed like captured fragments of the sea. The effect was mesmerizing. Morning light poured through the bottles, casting ripples of blue across the ground as though waves had washed into the garden. In the afternoon, their glow deepened, echoing the calm strength of the ocean. By evening, the bottles shimmered like twilight water, reflecting the last golden rays before nightfall. At the base of the fence, flowers thrived as companions to this seascape glow. Chrysanthemums bloomed like bursts of coral, marigolds burned in fiery tones, and asters stretched purple stars across the green. Sedum autumn joy blushed warmly, their tones softening the blues above. Japanese anemones lifted white blossoms that gleamed like shells against the sand. Together, bottles and blooms created a shoreline of color, blending land and sea into one. Neighbors paused at the sight, drawn to the unusual radiance. "It looks like the ocean lives in your fence," one whispered, watching the way sunlight spilled through the glass. Children pressed their hands to the shimmering shadows, pretending to swim among the blues that danced on the soil. The fence, once ordinary, now breathed with magic. It carried the rhythm of tides without a drop of water, the whisper of waves without sound. It invited those who saw it to step closer, to find peace in its glow. In small yards or spacious backyards alike, the bottles turned boundaries into beacons. As autumn deepened, the seascape fence remained luminous. Fallen leaves gathered at its base, their reds and golds mingling with the cool tones of the glass. Even in the fading light of shorter days, the bottles held their radiance, as though storing the memory of summer seas within their walls. This fence was no longer a barrier. It was a story, a memory of the ocean, a dream of light, a celebration of transformation. And in its glow, the garden reminded all who entered that beauty is not bound by place. The sea can live even in a backyard, shining through the curve of a simple bottle. In the quiet rhythm of a Japanese-inspired garden, simplicity meets transformation. Along the edge of a path, glass bottles rise gently from the soil, their necks buried, their bodies shimmering in light. Once vessels of waste, they now serve as guardians of space, their arrangement precise, their colors calm, emerald green, frosted white, cobalt blue, mirroring the harmony of nature around them. Between the bottles, sedum thrives, its clusters of blossoms steady and bold, grounding the design with strength. Chrysanthemums and asters weave softness between the sturdiness of glass and stone, their blooms glowing with autumn's richness. Together, they create a border that feels both intentional and organic, an understated frame for the serenity within. Here, each element finds balance. A stone lantern rests nearby, its quiet presence echoing tradition. Gravel lies raked in smooth ripples, a canvas of patience beneath the bottle border. A bamboo fountain trickles gently, its rhythm steady as breath, its sound a reminder of stillness. The bottles catch the light of water and sky, reflecting small fragments of beauty in their curved forms. Visitors who step into this garden sense the shift immediately. Noise fades, pace slows. The border, though humble, draws the eye to the details, the way glass refracts light, the way sedum stands resilient, the way flowers lean in unity toward the sun. It is not grandeur that captivates here, but subtlety, the art of seeing wonder in the simple. As evening falls, the bottles glow faintly, catching the last light of day. The garden deepens in tone, but the border remains luminous, whispering of renewal. Each bottle, once empty and forgotten, now stands as part of something larger, a story of transformation written in glass and blue. For the gardener, this border is more than design. It is meditation, a practice of care and imagination. It shows that even in the smallest corner of a yard, peace can be built, not with wealth or extravagance, but with creativity, patience, and the will to see potential in what was cast aside. In this Japanese-inspired border, the garden teaches its lesson quietly, that beauty lies in balance, and balance is found when we give new life to what was once overlooked. At the edge of the garden bed, where soil met path, stood a border unlike any other. Iron rods, once forgotten in sheds and workshops, had been bent and painted into playful shapes. Spirals, waves, and gentle arches formed a whimsical fence, each stroke of color breathing life into what was once only scrap. Painted in shades of cheerful yellow, sky blue, and soft rose, the rods stood like strokes of a watercolor painting. At their base, marigolds burst in golden flames, asters unfurled purple stars, and chrysanthemums laid petals in russet and cream. Sedum autumn joy glowed in pink clusters, softening the iron with their gentle blush. Together, rods and flowers wove a tapestry of color that felt alive with laughter. The edging was not grand or imposing. Instead, it was playful, an accent that made even the smallest yard feel enchanted. Children paused to trace the curves of the rods, giggling as their eyes followed the spirals. Neighbors admired how the edging seemed less like fencing and more like art, a gallery of iron lines framing a gallery of blooms. The garden itself seemed to revel in the transformation. Bees hovered along the rods, pausing to sip from nearby blossoms. Butterflies danced across the curves as though they, too, saw it as a path. The iron, once cold and forgotten, now carried warmth, its bright colors reflecting sunlight in playful patterns. In the quiet of evening, lanterns along the path cast shadows of the rods, their whimsical shapes dancing on the ground. The flowers glowed softly under the fading sky, their colors deepened by dusk. The border felt alive even in twilight, a ribbon of joy that stretched through the garden. What was once junk had become a frame for beauty. The rods did not hide their past. Some carried small imperfections, gentle bends where the metal resisted. Yet these quirks only added to their charm, proof that even flaws could find a place in the garden story. This whimsical edging was more than decoration. It was a reminder that boundaries need not confine, they can invite. It showed that creativity can turn the simplest scrap into something that sings, guiding the eye, the feet, and the heart through a garden where wonder waits at every edge. backyard, the pergola had always been a place of shade, a shelter where vines climbed and flowers rested at its feet. But when dusk came, something magical awakened. Teacups, painted and glowing, dangled from the beams, casting soft light across the garden. Each teacup carried its own story. Some were adorned with floral patterns faded by time, others brushed with fresh coats of pastel pink, mint green, or sky blue. Inside, small bulbs glowed like captured fireflies, turning the cups into lanterns. The light spilled gently through their rims, pooling onto the wooden table below, where marigolds and asters sat in simple vases. Above, the vines wove themselves around the beams, their leaves catching fragments of light, while chrysanthemums in golden tones stood nearby, reflecting the glow. Sedum autumn joy blushed warmly in the fading air, and Japanese anemones swayed as if nodding approval to the whimsical sight. Neighbors who wandered by slowed their steps. "Teacups for lights," they whispered with delight. Children gazed upward in awe, their eyes wide as the cups twinkled like stars hanging just within reach. The pergola had transformed from ordinary shelter into a stage of enchantment, a place where the humblest objects played the leading role. As the evening deepened, the lights grew steadier, glowing like companions in the dark. Shadows of leaves and flowers danced across the patio floor, moving gently with the breeze. The garden seemed to breathe differently under their presence, softer, warmer, as though every bloom leaned in to listen to the teacup's quiet glow. The pergola became a gathering place. Families lingered longer beneath it, sipping tea or wine, their conversations lit not by harsh lamps but by these playful lanterns. The cups, once destined to be forgotten in cupboards or cast aside as junk, had found their purpose again, bringing light where it was most cherished. They were imperfect. Some cups had tiny chips, others bore mismatched handles. But when they glowed together, their differences disappeared, blending into harmony. They reminded everyone seated below that beauty is not flawless, it is made of memory, imagination, and the joy of renewal. And so, the pergola became more than wood and vine. It became a canopy of wonder, crowned by teacups that whispered softly into the night, that light, like beauty, shines brightest when shared. At the edge of the front yard, where soil kissed the stone path, a thrifty border came alive. Not with marble or brick, but with rows of humble tin cans, once empty vessels of food and drink, now transformed into colorful cradles for flowers. Each can had been painted with care. Sunshine yellows, seafoam greens, coral pinks, and sky blues gleamed in the light, their surfaces brushed smooth to hide their old labels and dents. Some bore playful patterns, dots, stripes, and floral motifs that added whimsy to their shapes. Inside them bloomed chrysanthemums in golden bursts, marigolds blazing like tiny suns, and asters unfolding in shades of violet. Sedum autumn joy leaned outward, their blush-pink crowns softening the border. From the street, the border caught every eye. Neighbors slowed, smiling at the unexpected charm. "So simple, yet so lovely," one whispered, pausing to take a photo. Children skipped along the line of cans, counting them as if they were treasures, while bees hovered gently among the flowers. The thrifty edging gave the front yard a voice. It spoke of creativity, of resourcefulness, of beauty that need not be bought. With every painted can, it told a story, that what once held beans or soup could now hold blossoms, that what once was trash could become a frame for life. The garden responded with gratitude. Vines curled around the base of the cans, while fallen autumn leaves gathered like ribbons at their feet. A rustic wooden fence behind them cast long shadows, framing the border in patterns of light and dark. Pumpkins, scattered nearby, completed the seasonal symphony, echoing the warmth of the marigolds. At dusk, the colors deepened. The painted cans glowed softly in the fading light, their flowers nodding as though bowing to the day. The border, though modest, radiated charm, turning an ordinary yard into a place of delight. It was proof that beauty is not about grandeur. It is about intention, about the love poured into small acts. These thrifty cans, lined in a row, carried more than flowers. They carried a lesson in simplicity, a reminder that the heart of a garden lies not in expense but in imagination. On the patio, where the wooden table bore the marks of many seasons, a new kind of centerpiece had been born. Glass piggy banks, once meant to hold coins, now gleamed in the sunlight as vessels of blue. Their round bodies sparkled in shades of pastel pink, pale turquoise, and creamy ivory, each one cradling flowers that spilled joyfully from within. Chrysanthemums burst forth in golden russet, asters stretched delicate purple petals, and marigolds flamed with vibrant orange. Sedum autumn joy leaned gently over the rims, their soft blush catching the morning light. The piggy banks, whimsical yet elegant, turned the rustic table into a celebration of creativity, proof that even the most ordinary objects could find extraordinary purpose. The patio, though modest in size, became a stage of charm. Ivy curled up the posts, its green leaves framing the table like drapery. Pumpkins sat scattered nearby, echoing the season's warmth. The scent of flowers mingled with the earthy fragrance of autumn air, drawing in anyone who paused to sit at the table's side. Guests laughed when they saw the piggy banks. "I never imagined these could be so beautiful," one said, tracing a hand over the smooth painted surface. The banks, once guardians of spare change, now guarded something far richer, the fleeting beauty of blooms, the spirit of reinvention, the delight of surprise. Even in the quiet hours, when the table was empty of voices, the piggy banks glowed with presence. Their colors reflected in the window glass, doubling their charm. Bees came often, sipping from the asters, while butterflies lingered over the marigolds. It was as though the table itself had become a meadow, condensed into a single rustic surface. As evening arrived, lanterns hung nearby cast soft light across the table. The glass piggy banks shimmered like jewels, their flowers glowing warmly against the deepening sky. The patio became a gathering place not only for people but for memory, a place where the past and present intertwined in glass and bloom. These piggy banks were no longer symbols of saving. They had been set free, given a second life in the heart of the garden. And in their round reflections, the patio whispered its truth, that beauty is richest not in what we keep, but in what we create and share.